I never knew that the church held the key to my peasant ancestors' unbelievable survival. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The cold air wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. My heart raced. I stumbled upon my great-grandmother's diary, hidden away for decades. Dust danced in the beam of the setting sun, and every word I read ignited a fire of curiosity. Inside those crumbling pages were secrets, whispers of a life once lived in shadows and silence. She wrote about the church, enigmatic and powerful, claiming it was a sanctuary. But a sanctuary for whom? The words tumbled from the page, messy and raw, revealing that the building wasn't just a place of worship, it was a fortress for the forgotten. My fingers trembled over the ink-stained lines. Generations of my family buried their truths, hiding in plain sight. The church stood as a silent witness, harboring tales of survival. My chest tightened as I imagined my ancestor huddling in the dark corners of that moss-covered structure, heart pounding, breath caught in their throat. What had they faced? What horrors did they escape? The deeper I read, the thicker the air became, charged with unanswered questions and looming despair. The images formed starkly in my mind, torches flickering in the night, the scent of fear mingling with the damp earth. I could hear the whispers, the prayers lost in the echoes of the past. A chill trickled down my spine as I realized the church held more than just faith, it held the key to their survival and the truth of what they endured. Just as I was about to turn the page, a sharp knock rang through the tranquility of my room. My heart leaped into my throat. Who could it be? I hesitated, my hand poised above the parchment. The uncanny feeling that someone wanted to keep these secrets locked away crashed over me. What were they hiding? Did the church still guard its mysteries? My breath quickened, and I stood frozen, caught between the past and the present. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The knocking grew more persistent, echoing like a heartbeat against the stillness of the room. I could hardly move, transfixed by fear and curiosity, the diary clutched tightly in my hands. With each echo, I felt the weight of my lineage pressing down on my shoulders, demanding to be freed from the shadows they had long inhabited. Finally, I took a hesitant step toward the door, the old wood creaking beneath my weight. With a trembling hand, I turned the knob. Standing outside was a stranger, cloaked in a long, dark coat, raindrops clinging to the brim of a worn-out hat. Their eyes, bright and piercing, found mine with an unsettling intensity. "That I am sorry to intrude," they said, voice steady but laced with urgency. "I need to speak to you about the church." My heart raced anew, every instinct vying for attention. Who was this person, and how did they know? "I am not sure I can help you," I stammered, casting a glance back at the diary resting on the edge of my desk, feeling exposed. "Please," they urged, stepping forward cautiously, revealing a satchel slung over their shoulder. "I understand your great-grandmother's secrets are entwined with mine. There's much at stake. The church is not what it seems." A storm brewed within me, swirling confusion and fear alongside a flicker of hope. I felt the pull of the unfinished story, the one echoed in the pages of that diary. Defiance bubbled to the surface. If my ancestors had endured, perhaps it was time I learned to confront whatever shadow still lingered. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said, a decision that felt simultaneously right and terrifying. The stranger settled in, shaking off droplets of rain, their presence filling the space with unspoken tension. They glanced at the diary, then back at me, a knowing glimmer in their eyes. "That diary holds both truth and danger," they said softly. "The church, that sanctuary, holds secrets that should never have been forgotten." "What do you mean?" The weight of their words hung in the air. "There are beings who wish to keep those truths hidden, forces that will stop at nothing to silence those who remember," the stranger explained, voice lowering into a hush. You have awakened something that my breath hitched. Awakened what? The spirit of your ancestor, the one who took refuge, sheltered by the church. But those who would snuff out the light of the past have their eyes on you now. Their gaze bore into mine, filled with an urgency that made me shiver. You must decipher her words before it's too late. Hope clashed with trepidation within me. This was more than I had bargained for. How do I do that? Follow the trail, they urged, pulling a crumpled map from the satchel and laying it carefully on the table. This leads to the old church, but be wary, the path is not safe. You'll need to seal the history before those who wish to erase it can reach you. With each word, doubt gnawed at my resolve, but something deeper, a sense of responsibility toward my lineage, fueled my courage. What if I can't? I whispered, scared of what lay ahead. Then the stories will remain buried. Their voice dropped further into gravity. And your ancestors' fight will have been in vain. Silence stretched between us, a chasm I was now teetering on the edge of. The weight of the world was not just upon my shoulders now, it was a lineage, a legacy of survival reaching back through time, and perhaps the church was more than just a building. It was a living testament to defiance against darkness. As I looked at the map, my mind swirled with ideas and fears. Would I have the strength to confront whatever awaited me? Just then, my phone buzzed violently on the table, causing both of us to jump. I grabbed it, heart pounding, as a notification flashed across the screen. Urgent, the church is under threat. My blood ran cold. What did this mean? Who was after the church now? The stranger's eyes widened, panic flickering across their previously composed facade. We have to move, now. Trust me, it's not just your ancestors' history at stake, it's yours too. And just like that, I stepped into the dark unknown, propelled by the strength of those who came before me and the weight of impending peril. As I packed the diary, grabbing any sense of reassurance I could find, I knew that the fight for my family's past was about to unfold into something far greater than I could have ever imagined. The shadows beckoned, and I did not know if I would emerge on the other side, but I had no choice but to try. The rain had intensified, pounding on the roof like a war drum as I stepped out into the night, the dank air clinging to my skin. I held the map tightly in one hand while my other instinctively brushed against the diary, reassuring myself that it was there, that it was the anchor I needed as I ventured into the unknown. The stranger moved beside me, their presence both grounding and unnerving, cloaked in the mystery that shrouded our shared history. Remember, they said, their voice rising above the deluge, trust your instincts. The words felt hollow as we navigated through the maze of streets, puddles forming at our feet, reflecting the flashing neon lights of a city that felt both foreign and familiar. My mind raced with questions. What kind of threat could possibly come to something as sacred as the church? And how could my ancestors' struggle play a role in this conflict? As we approached the church, its silhouette loomed against the night sky, a haunting reminder of the past and a beacon of hope. But something felt off. The gates creaked ominously, and shadows danced along the facade as if whispering secrets. I hesitated. The weight of the past mingled with an electrifying fear, making my heart race even faster. Are you ready? The stranger asked, their voice muffled by the rain. With a deep breath, I nodded, steeling myself. Together, we crossed the threshold, the air cooler inside as if it were a sanctuary against the chaos outside. The dim glow of the flickering candles cast eerie shadows on the stone walls. The scent of aged wood and damp earth enveloped us, but it was also filled with something else, an electric charge of energy, a vibe that felt simultaneously protective and foreboding. We need to find the book of records, the stranger urged as they scanned the room. I followed them toward the altar, where a wooden pulpit overlooked the pews. It should be nearby, the key to unraveling the church's secrets, they said, their fingers brushing over the intricate carvings on the wood. As I peered closer, I felt an inexplicable connection to the place, like I had walked into the heart of my ancestors' struggle. Stories coiled around the age-old energy, and suddenly, I was overwhelmed by flashes of their lives, moments of fear, bravery, whispers of prayers that filled the air. Even centuries later, before I could voice my thoughts, a sudden noise echoed from the back of the church, an unsettling crash followed by hurried voices. My stomach dropped. We weren't alone. We have to go. I hissed, my instinct screaming that we were in danger. No. The stranger replied fiercely, "We need the records. They'll lead us to the truth." The voices grew louder, and I could make out fragments of hurried conversations, menacing and urgent. My heart raced, the fear morphing into resolve. The church may have held the key to a hidden past, but I wasn't about to let it be taken away. In a whisper, I grabbed the stranger's arm. "Let's find it together. Whatever happens, it'll protect the diary. We have to uncover what's going on here." They looked at me, an unspoken understanding brewing between us, and nodded. We made our way out of the sanctuary and started to search the shadows, the dim light guiding us toward a narrow staircase that spiraled upwards. As we ascended, whispers echoed through the stairway. They felt tangible, threading through my thoughts, urging me to remember. I paused, realizing they were fragments of my ancestors' stories, the fears and hopes woven deeply into the very fabric of this church. "Did you hear that?" I asked, tilting my head to listen more intently. The stranger nodded. "You're tapping into their energy, your own history." We reached the top and found a locked door, dust-coated and aged. My fingers brushed against the metal handle, and in that moment, I felt a stir within me, a connection pulling at the very essence of my being. "Maybe if I began, hardly aware of what I was saying as I pressed my palm against the door. The lock clicked, almost as if acknowledging my presence. It swung open, revealing a room filled with old tomes piled high, books that exuded the weight of forgotten time. My breath hitched at the sight. Here lay the stories, the truths that could unearth everything, but my victory was short-lived as a silence fell over the room, thick and heavy, and I turned to find the stranger staring behind me, eyes wide with horror. "They've found us." I whipped around to see figures emerging from the shadows, dressed in dark clothing, their faces obscured by hoods. My heart pounded as their intentions became clear. "We can't let them take the past," I whispered, clutching the diary tightly. "Run!" the stranger shouted, but even as they spoke, I felt the air shift around us. The atmosphere was alive with the urgency of the moment, and just as the first figure lunged forward, I caught a glimpse of the symbols etched into their dark garb, symbols matching those in the diary. My blood ran cold. It was no mere coincidence that they were here. The fight to protect my ancestry had become a fight for survival. We were outnumbered, but in my heart, a flame of determination flickered wildly. I couldn't let them extinguish the light of our history, that spirit of resilience that had survived generations, and in that moment, a new realization flooded me, a shocking revelation that threatened to upend everything I thought I knew. "Wait!" I called out, my voice steady despite the chaos. "If I can decipher this, the truth could change everything." But what I felt surging within me was no longer just fear or doubt, it was a call to action. With the echoes of my ancestors' struggles yet hauntingly alive, I was ready to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. I had to discover not only the truth but also the power that flowed through my blood, spiraling me into a confrontation I could never have anticipated. The room crackled with tension as the dark figures advanced, intent on reclaiming what I now understood to be a part of their inheritance as well. I felt the weight of the diary against my chest, its stories of courage and perseverance now entwined with the threat of these intruders. "Stand back!" I shouted, attempting to assert some semblance of authority. My voice pierced through the fear suffocating me. The nearest figure halted, tilting their head as if weighing my words, and for a moment, I saw a flash of confusion cross their obscured face. Could they sense the connection I felt to this place, this history? I pressed on. "You don't understand," I said, forcing myself to sound more confident, this belongs to all of us. It's a part of my family, just as much as it's a part of yours. We can't let it be lost again." For a heartbeat, time seemed to stall, and the shadows flickered around us. The stranger moved closer to me, their determination shifting the energy in the room. "We can't let them intimidate us," they murmured fiercely. My heart raced. I was fully aware of the risk I was taking, but intertwined with my fear was the unstoppable urge for connection. "You want the truth? Then let's uncover it together," I called out, my eyes scanning the intruders. I could sense their hesitation, their solidarity wavering against the fierce spirit that had once driven both our ancestors. The lead figure stepped forward, revealing just enough of their face beneath the hood for me to catch a glimpse of striking eyes that mirrored my own, full of understanding yet hardened by years of conflict. "You dare speak of connection when it was your ancestors who forsook ours?" they hissed, their voice a muted taunt that ignited a spark of defiance within me. "Forsook? No. You don't know," I began, but the stranger beside me interjected, "It doesn't matter what they did. What matters is what we do now." In the depths of chaos, I felt the bond grow stronger, the histories of our families intertwining. "This," I gestured to the books surrounding us, "is a testament of survival. We can rewrite the narrative, make amends." Another figure shifted, stepping out from the group as if summoned by the notion of hope. "You mean to tell us that you, as the descendant of those who wronged our line, are willing to collaborate?" they asked, voice dripping with skepticism yet tinged with curiosity. "Yes," I replied firmly. "Your pain is real, and so is mine. But if we fail to respect the stories trapped within these pages, we are doomed to repeat them. You can choose to fight me, but we both lose, lost in cycles of hatred." The air hung thick around us, and I could feel the weariness ebbing through the crowd like a tide. Forcing breaths into my lungs, I looked back at the stranger beside me. "We need to believe in something greater than our pasts now." "What you say is noble," the lead figure responded, their tone now softer, "but trust is a fragile thing." The words hung, and I saw a fleeting moment of vulnerability in their gaze. My heart clenched as I considered the weight of this moment, the despair gathered from years of struggle, now teetering on the edge of something miraculous. "Then let's start with this," I suggested, opening the diary to a page filled with my ancestors' ornate script, their words delicate and resolute. "Let these words bridge our pasts, they may hold the key to our futures." As I began to read aloud, the intricate verses echoed softly in the haunting confines of the room. My voice trembled, not from fear, but the gravity of our shared wounds. Whispered prayers of strength and reclaiming echoes surged. Beneath the weight of the inked stories, the need for understanding became palpable, and I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find common ground. But even as I carried on, I sensed a growing tension within the shadows. Not all individuals shared the same belief in this potential peace. From the corner of my eye, I noticed another figure hesitating, their gaze locked onto something behind me, eyes wide with alarm. They murmured something that sent a chill racing through the room. Before I could react, a burst of motion erupted from the rear, and reality hit with a staggering force. A second group emerged, stepping forward as if summoned by our confrontation, this time with an even darker intent. Glaring eyes burning through the dimness, their faces hidden by a cunning malevolence hinted at something far more sinister woven into our histories. "Enough of this." The new leader spat, voice thick with contempt. "We will not allow our legacy to be tainted or rewritten." In an instant, chaos erupted as both intruding factions collided, spilling secrets that echoed through the church walls like spilled ink soaking into parchment. My heart raced, torn between my mission and the tumult as the atmosphere frayed. The diary slipped from my grasp, tumbling to the stone floor, pages fluttering like the wounded birds our ancestors once fought to protect, and as the sacred words began to disperse, I understood the delicate balance hanging in the air, the choice between unity and devastation. The weight of decisions loomed heavily, for with every moment that passed, it was becoming increasingly clear, there were those who would do anything to silence the stories we cherished. Where we had once stood as allies, the ghosts of our lineage now bound us tightly to a history that sought closure but threatened further division. I had opened a door to uncover truths but had also awakened darker forces who would stop at nothing to see the truth buried once again. As desperation surged, a single page silently caught my eye, the delicate script calling to me with urgency. It felt like an unspoken promise whispered through generations. I reached for it, heart racing, as the world exploded into chaos around me. But just as I grasped the page, a shadow loomed above, and I felt an icy grip tighten around my wrist. "No more secrets," the voice hissed. "We will end this today." In that moment, I knew we stood on the precipice of revelation or annihilation, risking everything to unearth not just the past, but the future awaiting our choices. Would we stand united against the storm brewing on the horizon, or would history shatter beneath the weight of our fears one final time? As my pulse quickened, the voice that gripped my wrist sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through me. The oppressive power of the intruder was palpable, and my heart sank in recognition of just how tenuous our hopeful alliance had become. The chaos around us was a symphony of anguish and defiance, a cacophony resonating with the ghosts of our collective pasts. "I won't let you destroy this," I managed to say, surprising myself with the strength my voice held. I could feel the weight of each person in the room pressing against the fabric of my resolve. Their hopes, their fears, woven together with my own, igniting a fierce determination inside me. Suddenly, the shadow around my wrist loosened, and I turned to find the lead figure from the opposing side, eyes blazing with a mix of recognition and confusion. "Why would you risk yourself for that?" they demanded, freed from the veil of their own fury but still teetering on the edge of distrust. "Because I believe those words can heal us," I replied, my attention now consumed by the fluttering pages abandoned on the floor, remnants of a story yearning to be told. That I in the heart of the turmoil, an unexpected voice emerged, soft yet unyielding. It was the stranger who had stood beside me, whose bravery felt like a lifeline in the tempest. "It is precisely the past that binds us. Our anguish that is our common ground. Don't you feel it?" They stepped forward, eyes darting between the factions, pledging their intent in every tremor of their body. "What's done is done." Another voice merged into the fray, an accusation trailing on its heels as ancient scars bore witness to unresolved anguish. It was a voice I recognized from the opposing group, laced with bitterness like an edged blade. "No words can change what our ancestors wrought upon each other." Before I could react, the energy shifted again. A physical manifestation of discord bore down upon us as the new leader attempted to push their agenda forward using the chaos to solidify their grip. Yet, just as they began to yell over their counterparts, the voice by my side punctuated the air with raw honesty. "But words can change us. They can teach us the bitterness of anger, or the grace of forgiveness. Choose wisely, for this is a crossroads we cannot ignore." Another figure, one still cloaked in shadow, stepped forward, anguish radiating from them like heat off the pavement. "You speak of forgiveness while we stand here, commanded by our ancestors' blood. How does one forgive a legacy that left destruction?" Their voice cracked, betraying both vulnerability and rage, each word an echo that reverberated against the stone walls. That I looked around the room, desperate to find a way to bridge the divide. "What if we don't have to forgive all at once?" I proposed, my heart trembling. "What if we start by simply acknowledging our shared pain?" An eerie silence fell as I glanced at the scattered pages, thousands of stories swirling in the air. I knelt to gather them, feeling the cold stone press against my knees, and I could sense the attention shifting to me. Each word jotted down bore the weight of lives and choices. "These stories are ours, friends locked away in time and pain, but they are still here, yearning for a voice. Let's read them together." I held a page aloft, feeling its rough texture transform in my grip. As I began to read, voices lowered amidst the storm, finding solace in the cadence of my words. I could hear the past calling out, urging us toward reconciliation rather than division. But just as a fragile moment of tranquility began to nestle among us, a thunderous crash split the air, sending us reeling. The heavy door of the church swung wide, spilling daylight into our darkened sanctuary. A group of armed figures surged through, their intentions clearly hostile. "Stand down!" a commanding voice bellowed, echoing across the chapel, a voice tainted with decades of resentment and bloodshed. That I felt my heart plunge into despair as I turned to face this new threat. My eyes darted among the faces of the allies I had only just begun to connect with, dread creeping in as the reality of invasion settled in like a cold blanket. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, yet the diary, with all its potent stories, remained heavy in my grasp. "We must stand together," I shouted, but fear seeped through my determination as uncertainty flooded the room. Then, from the shadows, I glanced back at the lead figure, whose steely gaze had softened somehow. Something flickered there, perhaps a shared understanding, an inkling of unity amidst chaos that had begun to weave itself into the hearts of those who had gathered. I didn't want the courage we had cultivated to splinter in the wake of aggression, then an unexpected sound erupted. The stranger beside me began to chant softly, words of peace, threading through the cacophony of chaos, their resolve lighting a path for others to follow. One by one, voices began to lift, harmonizing with a new resolve, igniting a communal spirit just as the door creaked wider, revealing the grim darkness beyond, and in that moment, I knew we stood at a precipice it was do or die. With a trembling voice and quaking heart, I let the diary slip from my fingertips, into the outstretched hands of those around me. Together. I cried out, my voice drowning in the swelling tide of hope. But even as the room swelled with resolve, I spun to see our fierce intruder nearing too fast, and the world blurred around me. Just at that moment, a figure burst through the chaos, but it wasn't any ally or foe. I gasped at it was someone I recognized, and they carried a secret that could shift the entire landscape of our understanding. Stop! They shouted, and the energy shifted again, as panic rippled through the crowd at the revelation of their presence. All eyes turned toward me, drawn into my instinctive gaze filled with dawning horror, and I realized, with aching clarity, that perhaps this secret would change everything for better or for worse. The hush that blanketed the chapel was suffocating, each breath weighed down by the gravity of what had just transpired. The figure who had burst through the one I had known as a friend, an ally now stood before us like a ghost from my past resurrected. Their presence was electric, the air vibrating with tension, every soul in the room holding their breath as they processed the waves of emotions crashing against the walls of our fragile alliance. Please, just listen. They implored, voice shaking but intent. I've come to share something that could change everything for us all. Their eyes, usually warm and inviting, were rigid with urgency, reflecting the storm brewing inside them. A murmur spread across the crowd, anxious and uncertain. I glanced at the intruder who stood just behind the threshold, a grim shadow with intentions unreadable. My heartbeat raced as I turned back to the familiar face. The last time I had seen them, we were laughing among the ruins of a shared history, weaving dreams on the edges of our shared pain, and now, they stood on the brink of unearthing truths that could alter our previous understanding forever. What do you know about this place? I asked, my voice a faint whisper, laced with dread and a flicker of hope. What could possibly unite us after everything that's happened? The figure took a deep breath, visibly gathering their thoughts, and the room fell silent, waiting, clutching onto their words as if they were the last remnant of hope. The church, they began slowly, it's not just brick and stone. It's a sanctuary for the forgotten. I've spent months uncovering the records, piecing together what was lost to us. There are secrets in these walls, secrets about our ancestors that could illuminate the darkness of their choices. But and this is crucial, we cannot confront them as enemies, and why should we trust you? A voice shouted from the back, loaded with suspicion. I felt the palpable tension ripple through the crowd, fingers twitching on weapons and outstretched hands as everyone wrestled with conflicting emotions. Because, they replied, voice rising to meet the unease, because I've seen what they faced, and I've traced the bloodlines. Our past is intertwined, bound in tragedy and redemption. I found records, texts, there are stories of bravery, courage displayed by those you think were merely oppressors. They fought back against the darkness just like us. A wave of doubt swept through me. Could there be any truth in what they said? I searched the faces around me, their expressions a canvas of fear, skepticism, but also an undercurrent of curiosity. The looming intruder made an impatient sound, advancing toward us, eyes sharp and unforgiving. Enough of this nonsense. You think old tales can mend what's been shattered? You think you can rewrite history? They raised their weapon, but the stranger beside me held up a hand, a gesture of defiance. No, they can't mend it all, I inserted, my pulse pounding in my ears, but maybe they can guide us. Perhaps it's about allowing their voices to meld with ours to find a pathway forward, not just around this chapel but beyond into our lives, our decisions. My heart raced as I locked eyes with the familiar figure, searching for affirmation amidst the disarray that I in that moment of shared resolve. The stranger continued, do you remember the tale of the peasant revolt? Their eyes sparked with recognition of our shared history, and like a ripple across the sea, a shudder of collective memory swept through the crowd. Those stories, they speak of a lineage hidden within this very church. A peasant who defied their fati, a distant ancestor of mine who wanted unity. Curiosity pierced the thick brooding atmosphere, peppered with disbelief. Whispers began to rise, a soft static of hope woven through the confusion as I saw flashes of understanding among those gathered. But as the tension mounted, the intruder stepped closer with the heaviness of impending collision. "We're not here for stories, we're here for control," they bellowed, deep aggression simmering beneath their words. "You think you can afford to reminisce while generations of blood have been shed?" Desperation blossomed in my chest. "No, you don't understand. By confronting the past, starting here, we can dismantle this animosity." My voice trembled but maintained its honesty, uniting the fragmented shards of conviction in the room. Yet, amidst our collective yearning for understanding, that accursed secret lingered, heavy in the air, the very truth that could upend everything I thought I knew. I could feel it swirling, a maelstrom just beneath the surface, ready to erupt. "Your ancestor, they had a connection to the church. There's something hidden here that ties our histories together, something you need to know." The tear in the fabric of trust widened as I hesitated. The urgency tore at me like a fraying rope, and the truth began to claw its way to the forefront of my mind. "What will the revelation do?" I mumbled, stalling as the weight of the admission bore down. The tension in the room was tangible, hearts thundering in time with my own, as the familiar figure urged forward, desperation glistening in their eyes. "Only the past can reveal that. But once we uncover it," they said, voice low and earnest, "we either forge a new path or become the echoes of our ancestors' hate." In that charged moment, the intruder pressed forward, eyes narrowing, and I realized with despairing clarity that their intentions were perilous. I needed to decide, would I reveal the unshakable truth, knowing it could shatter not just the fragile bond we had begun to form, but also pit us against the very shadows we sought to escape? "Wait!" I shouted, a surge of adrenaline driving my words, the voices around me rising in confusion, desperation, and suddenly there were too many flickers of doubt intertwined with hope, creating a storm of uncertainty. But before I could gather myself, the earth trembled beneath us, a groan of stone and history, and as the shadows seemed to writhe around us, I realized time was slipping through my fingers. The true secret my ancestor had guarded, the key that could rewrite our future, was about to be unleashed, and it loomed as imminent as the clash at hand. Just as I began to speak, the walls around us quaked again, and the shadows shifted in a dance of uncertainty, leaving us teetering on the edge of revelation and chaos. The ground beneath began to crack, and as dust filled the air, a sudden flash of clarity flickered in my mind. Should I unleash the truth, knowing it could either bind us together or lead to our ruin? The shouting halted abruptly, replaced by a collective intake of breath as the very air trembled around us. The shadows writhed menacingly, and the crack in the ground widened, deepening the sense of impending doom. I felt the weight of agonizing decisions settle over my shoulders like an iron cloak, constraining my breath, my thoughts. What lay beneath our feet surged with a life force of its own, a history brimming with untold stories yearning to break free. "Stand back!" I shouted, but no one moved. The mingling of fear and curiosity held them in place, riveted to the ground as if enshrined in the moment. The familiar figure, barely more than an apparition between us, stepped forward. "If we're going to face this together, we need to know who we are." Their voice, raw and unsteady, cut through the tension like a lifeline tossed to drowning sailors. "Our ancestors fought their battles. Now it's our turn to confront the remnants of their struggles." Before it's too late, before I could respond, the intruder lunged forth, determined to seize control amid the chaos. "Enough of this. You think the tales of your ancestors grant you strength? They only led us to ruin." They brandished their weapon again, but the desperation in their eyes was evident. They were trapped in their own narrative, one chained to resentment and the belief that dominance equated to power. A flicker of hope ignited within me as I glided a step closer to that familiar face. What if bringing forth the truth is our only course? What if their actions, pure or flawed, permitted us to stand shoulder to shoulder right here and right now? The air rippled, charged with possibility. "You all must see what was sacrificed for your existence," the intruders shouted back, their voice wavering. The stories you romanticize come with blood, sweat, and tears. Generations suffered for you to live. How can you dismiss that? In the depths of that confrontation, I felt my heart pulse with a resolute rhythm, a chord struck by the unwavering spirit of my peasant ancestor. The choice lay ahead, clear and heavy. I wrestled with the conflict surging within. Why should I expose our murky lineage when it could ignite further fury? Yet, a deeper instinct told me that our history, raw and flawed, carried the seeds of our potential. I'll tell you, I said suddenly, my voice steadying as the ground beneath us trembled again. The earth seemed to summon the truth from its depths, as if urging me on. My ancestor did not just stand for one side of this conflict. They hid a secret, a truth waiting to be reclaimed. They learned to weave between worlds, binding both sides through ties of love and loyalty, not hatred. They were a bridge. A murmur brushed through my audience, doubt mixing with a scuffed-up sense of wonder. The way the walls trembled appeared to amplify my heart's assertion, melding our collective pulse into something unwavering and resonant. Tell us what you know, then. The voice of an ally surged from the fringes, weaving through the chaos. Beneath all the fear, curiosity sparked anew, a fire ignited in understanding that I hesitated, still haunted by what I felt was an impenetrable barrier. Long ago, before the separation of our bloodlines, my ancestor made a choice to shelter both communities under the guise of the church. They wore the mantle of protector, hiding written records that connected them all. I spoke, the words spilling forth like long-stuffed pain born of relief. The intruder stepped back, their visage flickering between anger and understanding, realization flashing in their eyes. It was a reflection of humanity interwoven, threads of our respective fates crossing in ways only history could reveal. Suddenly, the earth shuddered violently once more, and a blinding light flooded through the cracks, illuminating the chapel. The shadows retreated momentarily, and I could feel those long-hidden histories pulsating beneath us with an urgency lost to time. We have to unlock the truth. I shouted over the rumble, brave and trembling. The familiar figure nodded tautly, hiking their breath as they stepped beside me, the union between usants tethered by laughter and shared dreams now strengthened by the imminent threat we all faced. Together, we uncover the light behind our stories, but just as we gathered our resolve, the intruder's expression abruptly morphed from uncertainty to realization, a dawning horror behind their fierce resolve. You can't be serious. What if that truth leads us to ruin instead? What if it unleashes a darkness we've buried? Before I could answer, the ground erupted further, opening wide, and from the depths, a metallic box emerged, its surface glimmering with the dust of ages. My heart thudded painfully. This was what we'd been searching for, the origins woven into the heart of our struggle. But the intruder was fast and frantic, shoving people back. No. You must not. They lunged toward the box, and a split second later, time seemed suspended. A scream echoed through the chapel, suffocating all reason as my ancestor's truth hung in the balance, poised to either redeem or destroy. With one frantic leap, as the shadows began to encircle us again, I could either let history unfold or hold back a truth that could tear us apart. The choice loomed in the air, crackling with the weight of every life that had come before me, threatening to shatter the fragile bridge I felt forming between us. Would this revelation seal our fate or illuminate our path toward salvation? As the box hovered above the fierce chasm, tension crackled like wildfire. My breath hitched in my throat, the weight of history pressing down on me like a collective sigh of the ancestors, a summoning of intentions long buried. I knew that if I reached for the box, I could not return from that decision unchanged. Step back. You don't understand. The intruder cried out, desperation clawing at their throat, their eyes wide with the dawning realization of what that box could unleash. We've spent generations avoiding the darkness for a reason. You can't dive into the truth without knowing the consequences. I felt a storm brewing inside me, an intertwining of fear and resolve. The memories of my ancestors flooded my thoughts, sacrifices made for the sake of peace, the weight of bloodshed, and the bonds forged across lines that were never meant to divide. I glanced back at the audience, faces marked by a cocktail of fear and curiosity that mirrored my own internal struggle. No, we can't be afraid. I shouted, willing them to find courage along with me. If our ancestors held these stories tightly, it was because they feared how they could be distorted. But what if we learn from them instead? What if we finally unveil the truth of our unity? The figure beside me, that echo of familiarity, took a step closer, stance unwavering in the face of chaos. You speak of unity, but the stories that emerge may tear us apart, they murmured, their eyes brimming with a mix of hope and trepidation. Are you willing to risk it? Amidst the battering uncertainty surrounding us, I felt a flicker of warmth, the gentle touch of faith ignited in the pit of my stomach. I don't know what lies within, but I do know this, it's a part of who we are. Each of us holds a fragment of the same tapestry woven throughout our struggles. With resolve swelling in my chest, I reached out, fingers trembling against the surface of the ancient box. Just as I made contact, the box emitted a low hum like the distant sound of a forgotten hymn, vibrating with a resonance that tugged at my very core. The shadows paused, coiling back hesitantly as if held captive by the energy being summoned. With sudden clarity, I understood that this artifact was not merely a relic of darkness, but a vessel bearing witness to truths long concealed. A means to trust in our shared humanity. Please open it. I turned imploringly to the intruder, whose expression had shifted yet again, caught between fear of the known and hesitation in the unknown. They looked from me to the box, and for the first time, I sensed a longing to uncover the mysteries rather than bury them deeper, but before any decisions could take root, a quake erupted, throwing us all to the ground. The scene became a chaos of flailing limbs and raised voices as the chapel trembled beneath our feet. Dust fell like tears from the rafters, and in that disorienting whirl of fear, I instinctively reached for the box, feeling its weight settle firmly in my palms, and in that moment, my ancestors surged in a brilliant cascade of memory and purpose, faces of those I had loved and those I had lost, converging to form a bridge through time, guiding my hand toward the clasp of the box that pulsated in anticipation that I hesitated barely a heartbeat before I tugged it open, the hinges creaking as if to echo. The collective gasps echoing around me. The darkness that had once threatened seemed to retreat, compelled by the light emanating from within. My heart raced as the contents revealed themselves, a series of scrolls, ancient and fragile yet glowing with possibility, yet, before I could examine them, a piercing scream erupted from behind us. I turned my head just in time to see a figure frantically trying to withdraw from the shadows, friends and allies morphing into something unrecognizable, their expressions twisted by fear and turmoil. The ground convulsed violently, and the shadows lashed out, grappling with the very essence of my intentions. No! I screamed, trying to summon the strength of my ancestors, urging those around me to summon courage. But the darkness surged like a tidal wave, and I felt the fabric of humanity and crisis folding together into an overwhelming force. Get the scrolls. The familiar figure shouted above the din, their voice cracking, fear mingling with resolve. There are only hope for understanding. With a flick of my fingers, I grasped one of the fragile scrolls, unraveling it amidst the chaos. Scrawled lines of an ancient language intertwined with a meticulous script, a history begging not to be cast aside, a plea for existence. I glimpsed a delicate outline of my ancestor, their story weaving through the ages with wisps of love and pain, intertwining with the tales of those estranged from our shared lineage, and suddenly, I sensed the truth coursing through my veins. It wasn't only about the past but about the power to shape our present. But as I turned my gaze back to the chaos, terror gripped my insides. The shadows leapt forth, their howling cries enveloping the fear unfolding around us, and I realized I had awakened forces that sought not only to unravel our stories but to condemn us to the depths of betrayal. They surged toward me, and in that terrifying moment, the reality set in beneath the weight of revelation loomed, the darkness that challenged me to face both my ancestors and the harrowing truth of who I was. I had uncovered a flicker of hope, yet the echo of ruin loomed, heavier and more pronounced than before. As the shadows clawed for our fate, I heard the intruder's voice pierce through the chaos, desperate and wavering. You opened the box, but what if it sealed your doom? Time became an agonizing stretch, and I understood I had merely scratched the surface of our shared story. The answers lay within me, shattered yet a luminous puzzle. Now, the only question remaining was whether I would wield that knowledge as a weapon or a means of illumination before it was too late. The darkness writhed, a swirling mass of fear and trepidation that seemed to seep into my very bones. I gripped the scroll tightly, feeling the pulse of my ancestors who had endured the weight of the world on their shoulders, fathers, mothers, warriors, and scholars. They had fought to keep our stories alive, they had sacrificed so much, and now, standing at the precipice of destiny, I felt their silent encouragement urging me onward through the tempest. Read it. The familiar figure beside me shouted, their hand clasped tightly around a second scroll as desperation transformed into fierce determination. We need to know what it says. Our future depends on it, but could their voices carry over the cacophony of chaos? The shadows pressed closer, their chilling breath wrapping around my throat, pushing for an answer that seemed impossibly distant. I regarded the ancient script with both awe and apprehension, knowing full well that knowledge could be a double-edged sword. Just breathe. I urged them, though my own breaths came in shallow gasps, punctuated by the heaviness of fate bearing down on us. In this instant, I wasn't just battling for my own clarity, I was fighting for everyone who had stood resilient through the pages of time. Slowly, I began to decipher the swirling lines. Each word came alive, vibrating with flickers of truth. They spoke of our ancestors' struggles, detailing how they gathered strength in the darkest moments, forging alliances that defied division. They sacrificed everything for peace, I said, my voice hoarse yet resonating amidst the tempest. And they believed unity would transcend the shadows. At that moment, amidst the paralyzing fear thrumming in the air, a fiery ember of hope ignited within me. An echo of realization washed through my being. The shadows not only represented our fears and pain but also the potential for healing and awakening hidden truths. They wished to divide, to sever the hope that emerged from our shared humanity. The figure beside me, their expression flickering with guarded hope, nodded in understanding. We can stand against them. Unity against darkness. They reached for my arm, an electric connection that sent both panic and courage surging through my veins, but the ground quaked once more as shadows raged against us, their relentless tide threatening to drown the very essence of who we were. Fighting alone will lead to despair, I mused, recalling the stories of our ancestors who faced insurmountable odds only when united. We must combine our strengths. Our story to confront this. That was the revelation. Just as I sensed the threads connecting our past, I could feel the bonds forming among everyone present. Voices rose in a chorus of solidarity, resonating with newfound conviction. The energy amplified, an ethereal glow illuminating our circle in response to our whispered histories, weaving together our disparate fears and hopes into one resilient tapestry. Grab the scrolls. I shouted, rallying everyone. Together, let's uncover every truth and reclaim our stories. Hands clutched scrolls, fingers intertwining as we formed a chain of souls, united by our past and emboldened by its lessons. As we unfurled the fragile parchments, each word resonated like drumbeats, fortifying our resolve. The shadows, now clawing hungrily at the edges of our unity, recoiled slightly as if sensing their dwindling power in the growing light of our collective strength. We read aloud, voices mingling with echoes of our ancestors. The histories unfolded, woven with trials of survival that mirrored our own struggles. As we chanted line after line, I grasped the true meaning of our legacy. Each story was a thread thick with pain and love, resistance and connection. I could feel hope rising like a beacon, illuminating the path we needed to forge ahead. But just as we reached the climax, the scrolls flared momentarily, revealing a glimmering vision, a moment in time where our ancestors stood firm against a force akin to the one we faced. That imagery was intoxicating, but beneath the hope lay a current of overwhelming sadness. For they had not merely fought for survival, they had endured losses that stitched wounds into the very fabric of our existence, scars that could never truly heal. Before we could fully comprehend the wisdom of their experiences, a chill whispered through our midst. The shadows gathered strength, sensing the energy vibrating within our unified reckoning. Their howls morphed into anguished wails, echoing with memories of oppression long buried, a frantic attempt to pull us into despair. Stay focused. I cried out, locking eyes with the familiar figure beside me. Their unwavering gaze drew strength from mine, and I nodded, urging them to speak our shared truths louder. Each syllable dripped with determination, setting forth a challenge against the darkness. In that moment of resolute unity, we became a part of something larger than ourselves. We would not let the shadows consume. User stories mattered too deeply, woven through time, shared across generations, yet, just as I felt invincible, a singular piercing insight unfurled within my mind, a piece I had overlooked, a glimmering truth that felt impossibly heavy. The scroll I held hinted at not just our ancestors' survival against oppression, but also a set of choices made, betrayals enacted for survival, choices that might revel deep within my own bloodline. The shadows pulsated anew, sensing my dilemma, their despair entwining with the secrets I discovered. It was then I understood that I stood at a crossroads, not just of the past but the potential choices that lay before me. Would I risk reopening ancient wounds? Would unveiling my lineage force me to confront a betrayal more terrifying than the darkness itself? Don't falter. The familiar figure shouted. Your fear doesn't define you. With my heart racing, the understanding of my lineage threatened to freeze me in place, love and resolve fighting against the revelation that could pull us back into ensnaring chaos. My ancestors' decisions weighed down. What of their choices would come to define us now? Would I uncover truths too painful to face? Deep down, I felt the shadows pull at my essence, forcing me to confront the truth of my being amidst the blooming light of unity. If unveiling our history meant risking the bonds we had fought so hard to forge, was I ready to face the darkness that still lingered, or would we become yet another tale lost to anguish? The chaos around us seemed to still as I confronted my own truth. My heart began to pound inside my chest, echoing all the generations of ancestors who had fought, bled, and prayed for a light that I now held in my hands. The delicate scrolls dripped with history, yet with each revelation, I felt a potential fracture waiting to unfold. Enough hesitation. I roared, trying to drown out the shadowy whispers that sought to drown me in doubt. I was not just standing for myself anymore, I was standing for every soul bound to the legacy woven in with my own blood. If we are to confront the shadows of our past, we need to confront all of it: love, the regret, the betrayal. The stranger beside me, once cloaked in uncertainty, now took a deep breath, nodding solemnly as they grasped another scroll. Their resolve fortified my own. We will not be defined by the mistakes of our ancestors. We are more than that. Their voice cracked but rang with a raw intensity that sent ripples through the crowd. Just then, the ground shook again. The shadows writhed angrily, as if threatened by the illumination blooming within our circle of unity. They want us to hide. They want us to be afraid. I declared, urging the others to reclaim their voices. Letting fear win would bury the very legacy we seek to honor. The figures around me, allies now unified in purpose, began to shout their own truths aloud. My heart soared with every mention of histories previously buried deep in silence, the strength of our people and the memories that lived as ghosts beneath the layer of hate. The collective energy turned electric, stretching beyond the very walls of the church, a beacon standing against the encroaching night. And then, just as those shadows stirred to reclaim their dark dominion, something extraordinary happened. A luminous glow erupted from the box where the remaining scrolls lay, casting shimmering tendrils of light against each person gathered. The dark forces recoiled, their angry whispers fading beneath the incandescent pulse of our united voices, the very essence of our collective truth pushing back against the darkness. As if propelled by some ancient force, I took a step closer to the box, reaching out to the glowing scrolls that flickered with resonance beneath my fingertips. These stories are our allies, I called out, feeling the warmth radiating as they sparkled in near mist. We must forge them into a shield that protects and connects us. Our past is flawed, yes, but it's also beautiful in how it can guide us if we dare to acknowledge it. That moment, the shadows howled, a cacophony of anger mixed with uncertainty. I could hear their twisted cries, and yet I felt anchored to the realization that our voices did not simply stand alone, they united the past with every ounce of empathy and strength we could muster. Read! I shouted, and the gathered voices chanted passages from their scrolls, mingling pain with hope, yearning for healing within the scars the darkness sought to maintain. Each whispered acknowledgement of pain echoed among the rafters, rising to the heavens. Suddenly, one of the scrolls, perhaps sensing the surge of unity, unfurled completely and displayed an intricate image, an illustration of two figures, one dressed as a peasant, the other adorned in the garb of the ruling class, but impossible to distinguish one as an enemy. It was an embrace mid-conflict, a symbol of unity. My breath caught, and realization hit me like a gale-force wind. it was the intertwining of destinies bound together not by hatred but by choices made in the pursuit of survival. Then, as if the light fueled their courage, more members from the once deadly factions began to step forward. In that moment, they became allies, hearts breaking free from the chains of old divisions, eager to reclaim the truth hidden in shadows that had turned sworn enemies into allies. Your stories, I beckoned hesitantly, my heart racing against the tempo of the fading darkness. We need your voices too. Share them with us. The words spun fragile webs of connection, holding our histories aloft. Like treasures waiting to be unearthed, and one by one, they began to share off loss, of ancestral memories rehearsed from whispers through silences long kept. The collective knowledge surged, mending the laundry list of betrayals and unspoken truths. Hope blossomed amidst despair, knitting us together across chasms created by pain. As blurred lines of allegiance began to transform into genuine hands reaching out, the darkness paled, its grasp loosening. A curious power began to dawn, fighting to keep hold. Shadows writhed like fragments of storms ready to dissipate, sensing a palpable fear in what was yet to be revealed. How deep the roots of betrayal and mistrust are. As I continued reading aloud from the scroll that illuminated my palms, my voice pierced through the storm. It felt like a prayer, a promise binding the past to a future where understanding trampled prejudice. We hold the lives of those before us bound together now, not as adversaries, but as co-authors of a new story. Resistance flickered in the shadows, but it wasn't enough anymore. The tendrils slipped between the cracks of light and wove through the crowd as we pressed forward. Together, we grounded ourselves in the chorus of Balanginga Bond, forming a tapestry against despair. Then it happened. A hush settled over the gathered crowd. We formed a circle, heartbeats echoing as we grasped each other's hands. With every pulse, what had once been fear morphed into determination, into an understanding that our stories could no longer be restrained by shame, but rather celebrate resilience. That collective energy, hope reignited a fire within the trembling walls of the church, igniting the tarnished memories with renewed luminosity. I felt the shadows roll back, as if retreating from the surge of light, a light unable to be snuffed out by impossibly burdensome histories. With one last breath, I reached for the darkness within my own truth, the betrayal that had haunted me. My very lineage bears witness to the scars of our histories, I admitted, heart racing. But it holds strength as well. Secrets lead to understanding, paths of forgiveness beckoning just beyond fear. We have the power together to rewrite our story, bleed it anew, and emerge stronger. The shadows writhed yet again, their cries mingling with anguished gales. But as I grew bolder in sharing my lineage, one threaded with the failures and triumphs of generations, I recognized the battle they stood back to watch, the light we had generated now too fierce to extinguish. And then it happened. The church responded. A powerful surge resonated throughout the walls, sound swelled, a bond securing itself amid the riot of emotions. The darkness lifted, retreating further than it had dared to ever before. The story's unity, a bridge lit with hope now forming. Together, we stood on the threshold of a new narrative, one where darkness no longer defined us, shadows could not conquer us, and every soul present would find freedom in the sunlight of connection. As I looked around, my heart swelled with belief this was what we had sought. Together, we persevered through the swirling darkness, breaking free from old constraints that had threatened to suffocate our collective legacy. In that moment, I knew we had forged a bond that would echo through generations, a promise of resilience imprinted in the annals of our intertwined destinies. And as I felt the weight of my ancestors' gaze upon me, I whispered, no more hiding. No more shame. We shall walk into the light, hand in hand, and maybe, just maybe, we could finally leave behind the shadows chasing us, carved into our hearts but setting fire to our souls, the darkness fading before the brilliance of a new dawn. As the last remnants of fear ebbed away, I couldn't help but realize, it was in this crucible of shared pain and triumph that we found our most profound truth. The sacred fusion of our stories was not just for survival, but a testament to hope, leading us toward a legacy brighter than we could have ever imagined. For within the journey through darkness and the embracing of history, together we learned, love is the true judge of our fate, guiding every page of our intertwined lives, blooming with intentions forgotten but forever remembered. The final whispers of the fallen shadows faded, and I inhaled deeply, standing taller than I ever had, a figuration no longer bound by the weight of sorrow, but uplifted by the embrace of unity. Together, we walked into the light, and perhaps it was only now that we understood the power of our inheritance. Through those darkened years, we chose to rise, choose hope, choose each other, and the echoes of resilience sang out, setting our hearts ablaze with a promise that lingered across the horizon, one that would never fade. And in that moment, I knew we had written our story anew, a tale of pain transformed into love, of shadows giving way to everlasting light. And as I stood amidst this vibrant tapestry of souls, I finally understood the truth of our histories: in unity, we rise, and in love, we endure.